Invincible Mumu. By Han Jung-Wheelia. Chapter 139. Monstrous Master. Part 1. This. Byakwun was shocked. He had predicted that this warrior from the academy was hiding his energy or skills, but this was too much. Who would have thought he could jump over a river with a raft in his hands? And such a person's name isn't even known. He was referred to as Master Yu, but this much strength was absurd. If he had such power and Byakwun tried to fight him, victory and defeat would be difficult to predict. Sure, he could lift a raft, but jumping over a river with it was impossible. This meant that this master was a step above him in abilities. This is shocking. At this rate, the man would transport the rest of the party and horses in mere moments. The chance to do something to them would also disappear. I need to come up with a way to do it. The embankment would soon collapse, and the river's water would flood. Once that happened, he could no longer stop them if they managed to cross over. Before that, he needed to deal with the variable. If the river is being crossed one way or another and breaking the embankment is also done, what else can I do? Force them into the water. In an instant, he frowned and turned his gaze to the rest of the group waiting on his side of the river. Forcibly put them in the water? Come to think of it, there was no need to aim directly for that master. It would be easier to take down the other targets instead of him. Byakwun turned to look at Eugene Sung. He seemed to be the leader of the group. If Eugene Sung drowned, the monstrous man would be forced to divert his attention. Byakwun smiled as the rest of the imperial retinue gaped in surprise at Master Yu's skills. He isn't a human. To jump across the river at once. Ah. Master Yu is here, so there will be no more problems on the way back to the palace. Jin Sung was also very shocked at this. The more he came to know Mumu, the more different the boy felt. He felt so fortunate now that such a child was his younger sibling. Furthermore, this is luck. This was a great way to cross the river quickly. Once they got past this river and a cliff, only a few mountains and open plains were left, which were easier terrain to respond to potential ambushes. Thud. At that moment, Mumu, who had jumped over the river and set down another raft, turned to wave at the rest of the group. It was a signal to transport another group, and one of the men told Eugene Sung. Inspector, you head in first. I don't think we must be stuck with the order in this situation. No. You should move first. But, contrary to what we thought, nothing seems to be happening, but just in case, I will cross over last. Hearing these words, the rest of the party thanked him and bowed. Other people would have gone first instead of letting guards go first. Because of his strong sense of responsibility, many officials and guards from the palace liked him despite his young age. Hurry up now. We need to move before the waves get stronger. I understand. The imperial guards all climbed onto the raft. Jin Sung lightly nodded his head at Mumu and Mumu lifted the boat by bending his knees. Kwang. The ground he stood on sank as Mumu flew over the river again. Jin Sung then looked at the remaining people and horses. Just 2 more trips. As he thought that, however. You have brought such an annoying one. The voice of Byakwun from behind him shocked Jin Sung. The fact that someone who had been some distance away was suddenly behind him was shocking. Quack. Pack. Jin Sung immediately moved away but felt something sharp touch his back. It wasn't deep, but there was a cut on his back. Papa Pack. Jin Sung, who was hit unexpectedly, fell down before getting back up. Shoo. Before he could react, Byakwun ran towards him with a shining blue light in his hand. Blade energy. It was blade energy. He was indeed someone who was referred to as one of the top 10 warriors in the past to be able to use such skill even with his bare hands. Byakwun, who narrowed the distance instantly, used a wide array of movements and rushed forward. This shocked Jin Sung once more. 8 forms kicking technique. Using a firm lower body for balance, he created the angle needed on the water below him before pushing forward. Papa Pal. You are nothing. Chuck. When Byakwung moved his hand in a slash, the dirt on the ground flew up. Jinsung flew at him like a raging wave in the middle of this. Papa Pack. Oh. Byakwung evaded the attacks by moving his upper body, causing Jinsung's face to darken. Even after using all his strength, he could barely even touch this man. This young one is quite good. But... Shoo! Byakwung easily avoided a kick from Jinsung, moved to his left, and cut him on the right after a slight diversion. Your sides are defenseless. Huh. Drrr. Surprised by this, Jinsung tumbled to his rear and landed a kick on Byakwung's shoulder. Whack. And... Such a shame. A promising young junior with excellent skills and mind will have to die by my hands. The difference in power between the two of them was too large to begin with. Byakwung was still strong enough to be counted among the top 30 current strongest warriors. Therefore, both his internal energy and experience were exceptional. Hack. Byakwung grabbed Jinsung by the ankle and tried to cut off his leg. At that moment, someone rushed towards Byakwung with a raised sword. It was an Imperial Guard. Let go of the Royal Inspector, you bastard. Huh. Byakwung caught the blade with 2 fingers and bent it lightly. Chong. The sword then broke into 2, and he lodged the piece between his fingers into the Imperial Guard's chest. Quack. Quack. The guard who had tried to help stumbled backward. Byakwung tried to cut off Jinsung's leg again but was interrupted by yet another guard. This cannot be helped. Quack. Ack. He repeated his earlier action and kicked Jinsung in the ribs to keep him at a distance. Chong. Quack. Why are you so surprised at this? Pack. Byakwung grabbed a guard by his robes and threw him into the now overflowing river. Plop. Jip Young. Jinsung's shout made Byakwung laugh. I will push you down there, too, don't worry so much. What? Quack. As soon as those words were uttered, Jinsung was kicked in the chest. Quack. Jinsung was unable to avoid the kick due to his injured ribs. He bounced across the ground and fell into the river. Plop. Jinsung, who had fallen into the river, managed to reach the water's surface by swimming and struggling. Quack. He could not move as he wanted due to his internal wounds. Jinsung also wanted to find Jip Young, the guard who had fallen in and saw the man being swept away by the current. However, Yuk. Plop. Another guard fell into the river nearby, surprising Jinsung. He then turned to the shore to see Byakwung sending members of his group randomly into the water. Another one fell in with them. Plop. The Imperial Guards began to struggle in the water as they yelled. Save me. He helped me. I cannot swim, gurgle. At that moment. Bong. A figure crossed the river, grabbed the guard who could not swim, and pulled him up. Ugh. Master you. It was Mumu. He had arrived on the river's other side and noticed something happening as he set the raft down. Mumu rescued the man who could not swim and turned to his brother to pull him up as well. Plop. More Imperial Guards were thrown into the river. Plop. Mumu glared at the opposite bank to see Byakwung laughing at him as he threw the guards to random spots. He was even injuring them to ensure they could not swim to safety. Let's see if you can help them too. Growling. Byakwung smiled as he felt a strange vibration. It seemed like the embankment was finally collapsing. He could see a large wave rushing downstream as he looked up at the river. It was so large that one wouldn't think this was a simple river. Quackwowing. And no. Hong Nayan and the others who were on the other side were shocked at this sight. The sight of the water rushing down was too fast, meaning that saving everyone from drowning was impossible. They would also get swept away by the water if they didn't move away. Pwa! Forget us and get out of here. Jinsung shouted at Mumu. If Mumu tried to save them, the child would end up dead too. In this situation, it was more important for Jinsung that Mumu survived. But and master you? No. Pong. Ach. Mumu picked up one of the officials and threw him across the river. He then moved his hand towards the bands around his wrist. Mumu's skin began to turn black as his muscles swelled further. Crack. Pung. Pung. Mumu floated in the air as he clenched his fist. Mumu's right arm constantly contracted and released as it became more defined. His biceps, on the other hand, expanded. What is he doing, Hua? Jinsung was shocked and tried to speak as he was swept away by the waves. He couldn't understand what Mumu was doing. But... Quack quack wang. This. He was late. Jinsung fell silent at the sight of the river rushing toward them. No matter how strong a human his brother was, it was impossible to face this. Mumu clenched his fist and then punched forward. Insane. That is insane. Byakwung laughed inside at this sight. No matter how strong his body was, how could he stop nature? Even the 4 great warriors would not be able to. Kwang. At that moment, something unexpected happened. Tremendous wind pressure blew around the rushing currents and split them into a fan-shaped space. And that wasn't all. Kwa. The powerful river flow reversed across the broken embankment, causing the water to split through the immense force. Byakwung's smile vanished as his jaw dropped at this unbelievable sight. Chapter 140. Monstrous Master. Part 2. In an outlying area not far from the Golden Degree Palace within the Imperial City. Around the palace, there were many engravings. Inside was an old man drinking to the sound of the rain. A sharp-looking middle-aged man dressed in blue silk filled the empty glass and spoke to the old man. This truly is a great plan. Breaking the embankment didn't even strike in my mind. The heavens helped us. Strategy and tactics are more important than power. You are right, Elder. The middle-aged man who had learned new things about the old man while preparing this could not hide his amazement. Even a stable river would move like a tidal wave if they collapsed an embankment. Who would be able to survive that? If they survived that, then they would be someone who could perform miracles. Soon, we will get good news. At the middle-aged man's words, the old man shook his head. Even a perfect plan can have things go wrong. Prepare for even the smallest of oddities. Oddities? Don't I always tell you? Heaven is fair to all. They have a chance to escape the flooded waters, so we mustn't give them a chance to rest and continue to push them. Hearing the old man's words, the middle-aged man bit his tongue. As expected of this man. Within the imperial palace, a bloody political arena was taking shape. This man had the appearance of an ancient god who had been here since time immemorial. I feel bad for the princess and the king. To make such a person their enemy. The monstrous old man never let his guard down. The princess would fall into their hands, one way or another. The middle-aged man stood up and said, I will do as you said. Quack quack wang. Byakwung was shocked as he saw the river splitting in two and falling back into itself. This was something that went against all human senses. How could a mere human overcome a natural disaster with just a punch? But it had actually happened. Even if the 4 great warriors were here, they would have looked to save themselves first. What is that monster? And such a man wasn't widely known? He heard that this man was a master from the academy. At his level, however, calling him the 5th great warrior or something would be more fitting. It is the river god. River god. At that moment, the young sailors around him fell to the ground. For them, this was as if the river god had descended to help the people. Actually, even if it wasn't that, there was no way anyone could look away. Mumu's power wasn't something a human could possess. Insane. Kong Mui was also incredulous at the absurdity of this sight. He knew Mumu was a monster who had defeated 2 of the 4 great warriors, but wasn't this too much? To split a river. It is impossible. He had harbored the faint hope of taking advantage of this chaos to escape. He thought that he would find a chance if Mumu was occupied. But this monster was beyond that. He could never run. Badump. Hong Nayan, the princess, was watching this as she felt her heart beginning to pound. How could a human hold such strength? Calling it overwhelming wasn't even fitting anymore. Strong. So strong. She had been a desperate child who had entered the academy intending to help out her father. Her desire for this was still unquenched. However, seeing Mumu blow away the torrent of water made her feel something change in her heart as her face flushed red. Honestly, it would be impossible for her to reach such power even if she practiced with all her heart. How reassuring would it be if a man this strong could protect her all her life? Clench. She felt enough greed to want to put her hands on him. It might just be a woman's instinct to desire a strong man. As the river moved back, Mumu landed on the now exposed ground. Tack. Mumu, who had landed on the dry riverbed, clenched his fist and lifted it up. Mumu's gaze turned towards the river that was slowly weakening its flow. Although the power of one punch was strong, this was a temporary solution. Realizing this, Mumu came up with another solution. Clench. Mumu's wrist looked like a black iron bar. His powerful forearms rippled back and forth due to the contractions of his muscles. Kwang. Mumu's fist struck the exposed riverbed. At that moment, something even more shocking happened. Grr. The ground shook violently as if an earthquake had started, and the whole surface began to crack. People who had been caught by surprise at this were falling down due to the suddenly moving ground. Byakwung was no exception as he staggered to stay on his feet. Byakwung retreated faster than anyone else by using footwork as he witnessed this absurd sight. This makes no sense. The riverbed that Mumu had punched now had a large hole in it. It was so deep that no one could see the bottom of it. He is no human. Byakwung's body had trembled from the start of this. He realized that the man wasn't human. Even if he tried his best, it would be like hitting a rock with an egg. How was this monster not known? This was his biggest question. Swish. He noticed the river moving before his eyes. The river, returning ferociously, was now being sucked into the hole. Ah! An exclamation of surprise escaped from Hong Nayan's mouth. As the river water was sucked in, its force weakened instantly. As a result, the river's force flowing down to them was also weakened. Pang! Someone flew up from the giant pit, sucking down all the water. It was Mumu. He had jumped up and then turned towards the place where the flow was weakening. Pong! The ferocious flow slowed to a near halt, and the water level felt shallower. Because of that, Mumu was able to save his brother from drowning. Pack. Pwa. Are you alright? What was that? Although he had nearly drowned, Jinsung had clearly seen Mumu's actions and was shaken by them. He couldn't help but wonder about the extent of Mumu's strength. How did his father even find this child? Mumu smiled in slight confusion before saying, I should get to saving the others now. Some more imperial guards and officials were drowning aside from Jinsung. Jinsung, who had forgotten them due to the shock, nodded. Right. Pack. Puang. Yuk. Mumu once again jumped with his hand around Jinsung's waist. The force of it pushed Jinsung's eyelids and lips back. Papa Pal. Byakwung used his footwork with all his might. His terrified expression was painfully obvious on his pale face. Monster. He is a monster. Byakwung realized this and knew that thing was something he should never touch. How could he deal with someone that could stop natural disasters? Running away was the only answer. I need to get as far from here as possible. If he wanted to survive, he needed to get somewhere outside that man's range. Anything less would be dangerous. To think that such a monster hadn't shown himself until now. Even if he had great luck, it wouldn't be effective now. He should never have taken this opportunity to earn money and relax his body. Running into a monster of a caliber he had never seen in all his days as an active warrior was a horrible feeling. Damn it. It looked like he would need to stay hidden for a while. He felt bad for his contractor, but this was a monster that he couldn't take on. Kwang. Byok-woong, who was moving, was suddenly thrown back. He tried to correct his stance and protected himself with internal energy. Chuck. But then his body began to tremble. This. The man in front of him was Master Yu from the academy. Did he already save all the drowning people? Byok-woong was so shocked that he had to gasp for air. He had tried his best to use his footwork to run but had gotten caught anyway. I need to run. Byok-woong twisted his body as he attempted to make another attempt to run. Bang! Shoo! Before he realized it, Master Yu, or Mumu, had appeared in front of him with a stern face. Byok-woong, whose path was blocked, was now unsure of what to do. He had to do something to create a path of escape, but he wondered if any attack would work. Shoo! At that moment, Mumu rolled his finger and thumb and placed them on Byok-woong's forehead. A flick? He only realized it for a moment. Kwang. A simple flick to the forehead was enough to send Byok-woong's body bouncing back as he felt tremendous pain, as if someone had hit him with a stone hammer. Kwak-wak-wang. How many trees did he break? Byok-woong crashed through an innumerable number of trees until his body stopped on the rain-soaked ground. His forehead was bleeding as he struggled to recover from the shock. With a snap of the fingers and a simple flick, he who was once part of the top 20 warriors of the realm ended up like this. The opponent wasn't human. How could this monster come here? Why did he end up touching this man? He would have refused the mission if he had known how strong the opponent was. He was now feeling resentful of the person who sent him here. Bang! Mumu appeared in front of him again in an instant. He wanted to run, but he couldn't. He had tried to protect his body with internal energy, but the constant crashing into the trees had broken his back and spine. Clench! Mumu grabbed him by the head and lifted him up, filling him with fear. Mumu then said to him, "The hand you were waving at me earlier. Was it your right hand?" Byok-woong's eyes trembled. Why was this man asking that? No. Pack. Mumu immediately grabbed his right wrist. And crack. Quack. Without a hint of mercy, Byok-woong's right arm was broken as he screamed in pain and fear. Seeing an old man in his 70s screaming in pain would weaken anyone's resolve, but not Mumu. He only responded dryly. It's only getting more annoying, like moths coming to a fire. So let me ask you one question. You will answer me truthfully unless you want your back to be broken utterly. Ugh. Who ordered this? Outside of the Golden Decree Palace in the Imperial City. At the pavilion at the back of the palace, the old man still sat drinking. He was waiting for the moment when the measures he had set would finally bring him the princess, Hong Nayan. King, you shouldn't have kept such a treasured thing outside. Your foolish choice has. Kwang. The old man spilled his alcohol from the shock. What was that? The entire backyard felt like it was shaking. Did an earthquake happen? As the old man was puzzled, a stern-faced middle-aged man came striding toward him with something in his hands. Byok-woong? That horrible-looking existence was Byok-woong. The man was speechless for a second. How could Byong-wook, who was supposed to be days away from here, be here in the hands of an unknown man in such a crippled state? Chapter 141. Monstrous Master. Part 3. How can this? Byok-woong was shocked. He couldn't overcome the fear that took over his body because of Mumu, so he lost control of his mouth. The relationship was purely monetary, so it didn't matter to him. Neither was he known for being loyal or self-sacrificing, yet this situation was embarrassing. This guy, he cannot be a human, right? It had taken them less than half an hour to fly to the capital. This was impossible for even the best light footwork users and was unheard of for those capable of void movement. To reach here in such a short time. The old man, Yang Yongmyung and owner of this palace, frowned at this sight. Of the 6 departments that administered the land, he was head of the finance ministry and worked directly for the imperial family. He dominated the palace's political sphere after working in it for more than 30 years. He was also one of the 3 main contributors to the enthronement of the current emperor and was also the father of the imperial consort. Is it that old man? Mumu asked the shell-shocked Bayakwoong. Bayakwoong wasn't sure how to respond to this. If he confirmed it, his employer's identity would be exposed, and his name as a great warrior would be tarnished. Looks like you want to have your back twisted. Why yes. It is him. Bayakwoong's pride collapsed in an instant under Mumu's threat. He had no doubt that this monster could actually do it. He was already 74 years old, and going through pain was scarier than humiliation. At that moment. Enemy. Protect Elder Yang. Swish. Warriors assigned to guard the palace began to converge to their location. The warriors gathered in an orderly manner and surrounded the still-disguised Mumu. Yang Yungmyung, who shook off his surprise at the situation when his guards arrived, asked. Old man Bayak. What is this? Bayakwoong was unable to respond to his question. This was no longer a situation where they could just look at each other and talk. A middle-aged man wearing blue robes stood alongside the old man. Elder, are you all right? Messenger. The messenger troop was in charge of communication between the emperor and the finance halls. Mun Kyung could be considered Yang Yungmyung's right hand and was of the 4th rank inside the messenger troop. Despite being the same age, he was active in Miram. Unlike Bayakwoong, he didn't possess a title as part of the top 10 but was still a hard worker. And at his appearance, Yang Yungmyung could finally speak confidently. The warriors here were all first-rate warriors, so he was confident they could handle this situation. And? You cannot fight this man. Bayakwoong was trying to tell them this with his eyes as he couldn't speak openly. As expected, his warning was not able to be communicated. Yang Jangmyung stood up with his hands behind his back and asked Yek Cheon, a warrior among his retinue. Old man Bayak seemed to have decided to change the direction his sword points to. Hearing this, the middle-aged man asked sharply. Do you know him? I don't know. Even when I was active, I had never seen him before. And if he subdued Bayakwoong, he cannot be an ordinary person. A strange one. Strange? The intimidation. The feeling he gives is just below first-rate warrior. But he took down Bayakwoong? Yek Cheon couldn't understand this. He couldn't be careless because of that. The steam rising from the enemy's body was also extremely intimidating. Can he be subdued? I am not sure. Yek Cheon was being honest. There were those whose energy levels could not be comprehended with just one look. Even if this opponent didn't look like much, he still took down Bayakwoong. We cannot jump into a fight. Yek Cheon stepped up and declared. I am Yek Cheon of the messenger troops. If you know the rules of Central Plains, then reveal your name. At least if he knew his name, he could identify this person. However, Yang Yungmyung didn't like how this scene made his men appear as if they were lowering themselves. How can you act like that to this person with no manners? At this, Yek Cheon whispered softly. Elder, if that person was who made old man Bayakwoong into that state, then he is likely strong. The strongest person here, most likely. It might be better to coax him than be arrogant about it. Stronger than the top 20 warriors? Yang Yungmyung was an official of the state, but he also had a reputation for being well-versed about the top 20 warriors. He heard that each of them was skilled at their own things. Hearing the advice from his men, Yang Yungmyung touched his beard. As Yek Cheon said, appeasing a strong warrior wasn't a bad move. After all, it wasn't every day that you had the chance to come across someone who could lead Bayakwoong in this state. Yang Yungmyung nodded. Go ahead. At those words, Yek Cheon raised his voice. This person here is the esteemed father of the imperial consort and highly regarded by many warriors. You are in his presence right now, so. But before he could finish his words, Mumu cut him off. Don't care. Did that old man send this one to the river? Old man? Everyone around him frowned after hearing Mumu's words. The man appeared to be a middle-aged man with a tough expression, but his voice and words felt young and naive. While they wondered among themselves, Mumu said, "I came here to give a warning because you are constantly sending people and bothering me." Warning? Yes. To tell you to stop. But even if I warn you, you will continue to send people, right? Huh. Even Yang Yungmyung was dumbfounded at this. How dare this cheeky bastard come to his place, one of the top 3 powers in this nation, and question him? There was no way that a man who was hostile right from the start would even consider siding with them. Convinced, he shook his head this time. This only made Yak Cheon sigh. He only wanted to avoid a fight as much as he could, but this felt like a lost cause, so Yak Cheon pulled out his sword from its sheath. SRNG. Yak Cheon aimed the tip of his sword at Mumu and declared, "I have no choice since the lord I serve has repudiated your rudeness. Let's compete." Pat. As soon as he declared that, Yak Cheon rushed forward to Mumu like lightning. Those who saw this all exclaimed. His speed was expected of a person known to be as skilled as the top 10 warriors. Tai Fate Sword, 4th Form, Integrity Sword. Cha-cha-cha. Yak Cheon's sword, which was shining blue, flew towards Mumu. Mumu, however, didn't move or avoid it but simply stood there. Cheeky bastard. Did he actually think he could avoid this when they were so close? If he thought that, then it was a huge mistake. Chong. Yak Cheon's eyes widened as his sword, which was supposed to have pierced Mumu's chest, broke instead. This? What was that? Why you have a diamond bod? Clench. Yuk. Before he could even finish his question, Mumu grabbed Yak Cheon by the head. This shocked him and made him attempt to cut off Mumu's wrist. But it was something that his intact sword could not do. A broken blade had no hope of doing it either. The rest of his blade also shattered into nothing. Yak Cheon then decided that kicking would be the next method. Quack. But before that could happen, his head was crushed. Everyone who was watching this was thoroughly shocked. Who could have thought that Yak Cheon, the master of the Tai sword, would die with his head being crushed after being unable to properly use his sword? Thud. That monster. Byak Woong was even more terrified now. Yak Cheon was someone even he would have difficulty fighting against, but this man had killed him as easily as crushing a bug. Chuck. Mumu wiped the blood from his hand onto the ground. Yang Yungmyung, who was at a loss for words, decided to make his order. Kill him right. Bang. Hook. But he couldn't finish his words either as Mumu appeared in front of him instantly. Seeing this, Mun Kyung drew his sword and tried to behead Mumu. This? Chong. Mumu grabbed his sword without even looking at him, making his face pale. This man was a monster beyond common sense. There was no way he could go against this. Why, you are a master of the academy? Do you think that a master of that place, supported by the nation, will be safe if he touches the member of the imperial palace? Based on the information he had received, Mun Kyung guessed that Mumu was a master from the academy. Since the academy was helped by tax reductions and supported by the previous emperor, he thought his words would be heeded. But so, what do you want me to do? What? You are the ones who touched me first. And it wouldn't matter if no one knows who did it, right? Mun Kyung was shocked at this. He couldn't believe that someone dared to say this here. Huh. At that moment, Mumu put his finger on Mun Kyung's forehead and lightly snapped his fingers. Pack. The force was so strong that Mun Kyung's head flew off, and his body fell limp while spurting blood. Seeing this, Yang Yungmyung stiffened, unable to move. Where the hell did such a monster come from? Drip. Yang Yungmyung felt his pants go wet. He had never felt such fear in his life. Although he was old, it wasn't like he had lost control of his body yet, but he could not control this fear. Mumu then stretched his hand out to him, shocking Yang Yungmyung and causing him to kneel on the ground as he begged with all his might. I was wrong. Great man. Please spare me. His face or pride didn't matter. He only wanted to survive. This stupid old man did a foolish thing. And if you wish, I will hand over all my things to you, please spare me. Tack. Mumu put his hand on Yang Yungmyung's head and spoke softly at him without emotion. You should have said that earlier.